Welcome back to Beyond the Film Room. Today we are going to be diving into F1 the movie. Just saw it last night, and I gotta say it was awesome. Pleasantly surprised. Wasn't expecting it. We weren't even planning to see it this summer. So, as we typically do on this channel, we're going to look at the movie from the standpoint of the four cores of peak performance to help you athletes figure out how you can use these films to better your performance on and off the court. So, first question, from a physical standpoint, what was your impression of F1?
I think that, so I don't watch F1 normally, and that's part of the reason why we weren't as interested into the film come summertime, but it got great reviews. I heard good stuff from my friends, and so we thought we'd check it out. I didn't know how much F1 drivers have to go through in terms of training, and then just what it does to their body when they're in the car, whether it's like holding the steering wheel straight or being able to take on the force of the car going that fast. I didn't know how much like F1 drivers had to do in order to prepare themselves for a race. In the movie, you see a lot of running, a lot of eye-hand coordination stuff. They do a lot. Oh, one time Josh Pierce was doing like neck training. The guy was pulling his head and he's like training the muscles in his neck. It's quite impressive and honestly insane the extent of training that F1 drivers have to do, because I never understood it from that point. Like, it literally is a sport.
I agree. And I have a whole new level of respect for F1 drivers now. Like, they are athletes, like up there with, I would think, some of the best trained athletes in the world. And yeah, the amount of training that they have to do, the running, the hand-eye coordination. Brad Pitt's character, Sonny, does a lot of this. Like, he was doing juggling and like ball bouncing stuff, which they didn't really unpack in the movie. So I was curious I'm going to go back and see like why was he doing this stuff. I'm assuming it's either eye-hand coordination or something, but the level of kind of physical prowess that these guys have is next level. And I fully appreciate, like, I did a little bit of research before we saw the movie, and you see Lewis Hamilton is a producer in the movie. He's obviously famous, probably the most famous F1 driver that I'm aware of in this generation. So he's a producer. He also makes an appearance, couple cameos in the movie. And I think one of the things that he talked about was wanting to make this as true to life as humanly possible. So him being a producer and in the movie, I think gives us a pretty good indication that this is actually what these guys go through. And it was pretty phenomenal from a physical standpoint in terms of the training that they do. So there isn't a ton to unpack there other than the fact that, you know, these guys are legit athletes. Apologies to any F1 fans out there, ignorant before this, but now fully aware that these guys are on another level in terms of their athleticism and their physical abilities. The other piece, which is kind of the second core of peak performance, which I thought was kind of mind-blowing, is the amount of mental capacity and intelligence that these guys have and their teams have. So we'll get into the team aspect of it a little bit later on. But just talk to me a little bit about what you saw in the movie in terms of mentally what these guys have to prepare and go through in order to get into a race.
Right. To be able to maintain that level of focus and dedication to a race like that. You talked about the juggling. There's instances where Sonny Hayes is just sitting, listening to music, thinking about the race pre-race. And to have to drive for, some of those races are 24 hours long, right? So you have to prepare for long moments in the car, your awareness of drivers around you, your awareness of turns, the speed that you're going at, when to brake, when to pass. There's a lot of stuff that you have to train yourself for mentally when you're getting onto the road, not to mention that you could potentially die if anything goes wrong. More so than other sports, I think, because your life is on the line, there's a lot more that you have to train your mind for and make sure that you're focused and prepared at the utmost, because your life is in your hands if you're not on your A game. There's a lot mentally that you have to go through before you get in the car and behind the wheel and on the track.
Absolutely. There's a company in peak performance space that works a lot. I don't know if it's exclusively. They work a lot with F1 athletes called Hinsa. So shout out to Hinsa if you guys are watching this. But I haven't worked with any F1 athletes, and it's definitely on a bucket list in terms of athletes that I'd want to work with from a performance standpoint. because what is clear in that movie is that not only the decision making that you're talking about in terms of being on the track, knowing what to do when, taking feedback from your team at the same time, and also being able to stay focused, when you're tired, to know, on pit stops, and again, kind of getting instructions from multiple people. But there's also a cool aspect that they involved the drivers in this movie. So Brad Pitt's character, Sonny Hayes, there's going to be spoilers throughout. So if you haven't seen this movie, go back and watch it, and then come back and watch this, and we'll get your comments we'll hear your comments down below and kind of see your feedback. But one of the things that Sonny Hayes' character does in this movie is he provides feedback to the technical director about the design of the car, right? So his in-depth knowledge about all of the conditions out there, like the wind and the drag, and where other drivers are coming in and out, and kind of the strategy in terms of how to manage the other drivers around him so that your team can win, which was kind of cool, something I didn't really realize before watching this movie.
Yeah. There's some interesting stuff in terms of his strategy is not always, I have to be first in the race. It's the team has to do well.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I thought it was just really cool to see the level of intelligence that these drivers must have. And then you need to know about this rocket ship that you're driving, essentially, right? Like, what components do you need? How does a car feel, and what things are working and what things are not working. So just from a mental standpoint, again, a completely new level of respect for these drivers and the amount of tasks and decision making and just intelligence that these guys must have in order to juggle all of these things at once to be an effective driver.
On what you're talking about in terms of intelligence of the car, I thought it was an interesting difference between Sonny Hayes and Josh Pierce up until the end of the movie, because at the beginning, Josh Pierce is driving the track in preparation for a race, and the head of the technical direction, what's her name? Kate. She asks what's going on with the turns, because Josh Pierce was upset about how the car was moving on certain turns, and she's like, well, what turns specifically are you struggling with? He's like, I don't know, like all of them. But when Sonny Hayes comes in, he's like, yeah, turn 3 and turn 5, I can feel a drag here, and blah, blah, blah. And it's impressive how he knows not only the car so well, but the track so well. And then later on in the movie, he's talking about building a car for combat. And he's looking at her designing this car, and he's like, well, are you taking into consideration dirty air from drivers in front of you? She's like, no, we can't do that. Are you taking into consideration weather and rain? Well, we can't do that. So he knows, as a driver, being out onto the road, everything around him, everything that can impact a race, everything that can impact his focus and his driving. So he definitely, bringing Sonny Hayes in obviously changed the direction of that team completely. And it's just interesting to see how much a driver needs to know in order to race. Totally.
And it really made me reflect on the fact, like, if you bring it back to other sports and athletes that are really able to kind of separate themselves from the pack, they do have this understanding that like, my skill level obviously needs to be at an elite level in order for me to perform. But then they bring in all of this other knowledge about their team and plays, and maybe not environmental stuff from that standpoint, but they have a much wider knowledge of the entire game, and it allows them to play the game and strategize at a level that the average player, like Josh Pierce's character, he's just starting out.
Yeah.
He wants to be a great driver. He wants to be one of the best, but he's also, in it for the likes and the engagement and the popularity, right? And Sonny, who's the veteran and maybe doesn't have the physical skills that he once had because it's a physically demanding sport, knows that all of these other things he can use to his advantage from a strategic standpoint. So mentally and mindset, this is a really cool movie to analyze and break down in terms of what it takes mentally to set yourself apart from the competition.
Yeah, for sure. Not having watched F1 before, in terms of the sport, it's just mind-boggling to me how much these athletes actually have to train themselves for, both physically and mentally. There are shots in the movie where you're kind of getting a POV perspective from being a driver in Sonny Hayes' position, especially at the end of the movie in the final race. You get a full-on POV shot going around, I think, 4 different turns before hitting the finish line. And just watching the movie, I'm like, if I was in that position, I would be passing out at that speed. Everything's passing by you so fast. There's a race in Vegas. You think about all the lights in Vegas, like seeing them zoom past you at 250 miles an hour. I don't understand how you'd be able to do it, but it's crazy.
It is,
like you
really
said, like
crazy.
a whole new respect for F1 athletes,
Definitely,
for sure.
definitely. And I think that's a good segue from mental to the kind of the social relational aspect, because that was another thing that I had no idea. I mean, you've got a massive team of people around these drivers that, you know, from the technical team to, I mean, there was literally 4 guys, I don't know all of their titles. You know, there was the principal who kind of owned the team, and then you had the technical director, and then you had the guy who was, I can't remember his title or his name, but I think he was the de facto kind of leader for the entire team. He was the guy who was the mechanic at one point.
Yeah.
So you got him, and then you got his right-hand man, and then they would have these team meetings where you have, you know, a dozen people sitting at a table to define the strategy for the next race. And then you have the pit team. And then you have, you know, an investment team, right? So unlike a team sport where you've got multiple people kind of playing and working together, and then you have staff, here you have, it really felt like there was the business aspect of it for sure. But it also felt like, you know, these people working on all of the technical and strategic athlete aspects to help these athletes succeed. And it was interesting to see the relationship between, you know, when Sonny kind of came in, and, you know, they were skeptical about this old guy who really hadn't achieved much and whether he was going to achieve anything. And his ability to make relationships and communicate with all of the different people on the team. Like, you could see he was very deliberate about that right from the moment he came in. And he made Josh Pierce, you know, aware of the fact that you need to be on board with these guys and be on the same page with these guys because, you know, we're all working together to achieve something.
It's very much everyone knows their role, and everyone has to play their role to the utmost level that you can perform at. There's a part where Sonny Hayes is talking with the team, and he says, if I can save 1/10 of a second on this turn, and you can save 1/10 of a second on replacing the tire, and you can save 1/10 of a second on telling me where to go, and you can save 1/10 of a second on your job, that is 1/10 of a second for a moment. And if we all save 1/10 of a second for 72 laps, that's the difference between last and first place. And so it is interesting to see all of these people who have very different roles. No one could do what the other person does. And if they all are performing at the highest level, that is the difference between finishing last and finishing first in a race. Like you said, I didn't realize how many people were involved in making a team come together for a race. And even just the relationship between the two drivers, it's kind of funny because you don't think about how there is only one first place finisher, but you have 2 drivers on the same team. So someone has to make a sacrifice in terms of, well, someone has to finish first, so what can I do to either help that person finish first, which Sonny does quite a bit, whether it's kind of sketchy or not, which is funny. But the relationship aspect in terms of to make that team click, it's similar to team sports, but it's just so different because if you
They're competing against each other.
Exactly. So
yeah, I thought that was a really unique aspect and kind of how they manage that relationship, because not only are they competing and competitive and one of them feels threatened, rightfully so, but there's also this dynamic of kind of old versus young and old school versus new school in terms of how they approach not only their training, but how they interact with the other people on the team. So again, you know, we've said this multiple times, but a massive amount of respect for the F1 community and the athletes there, and the amount of collaboration that I think is necessary in order to make a successful team a winning team. So last but certainly not least, there's a lot of interaction in this movie from, you know, the personalities and the building of the relationships there, but there was a spiritual aspect that I thought was interesting, which is kind of the underlying thread through this movie is really just the main character Sonny's just desire to drive and the experience of driving, and how it didn't matter if it was F1 or Baja or Daytona, just this feeling of freedom and connection to kind of doing what he felt like he was designed to do as a driver. What did you think about that?
There's a question that's asked to Sunny at the beginning of the movie when she says, how much money are you getting? He says, it's not about the money. She says, what is it about? The same question is asked to him at the end of the movie, and they're like, well, we can't give you a ton of money. And he's like, it's not about the money. And he says, what is it about? And I just think that when someone has a passion for something that deep that you can't take away no matter what you're giving them, that they're not in it for anything, just for the love of it, I think that is when you can become the most successful at it, because you just love to do what you do. And he just loved to drive.
He did. And it was cool because he doesn't answer the question at either parts of the movie, right? He just kind of smiles and, nods or whatever. But you can see that deep in his soul, that's what he's here for. And he ends up leaving the team ultimately and going to pursue his own thing, but still driving. So definitely check out F1. Check out some of our other videos up here. I'll put another performance video that you guys can check out. But F1, worth your money. Whole new appreciation for the field. And we'll see you on our next video.
Yeah. Thanks for watching. Leave a like. We'll see you next time.